This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jill Preston. Science of Being Well by Wallace D. Wattles. Preface. This volume is the second of a series, the first of which is The Science of Getting Rich. As that book is intended solely for those who want money, so this is for those who want health and who want a practical guide and handbook, not a philosophical treatise. It is an instructor in the use of the universal principle of life, and my effort has been to explain the way in so plain and simple a fashion that the reader, though he may have given no previous study to New Thought or metaphysics, may readily follow it to perfect health. While retaining all essentials, I have carefully eliminated all non-essentials. I have used no technical, abstruse, or difficult language, and have kept the one point in view at all times. As its title asserts, the book deals with science, not speculation. The monistic theory of the universe, the theory that matter, mind, consciousness, and life are all manifestations of one substance, is now accepted by most thinkers. And if you accept this theory, you cannot deny the logical conclusions you will find herein. Best of all, the methods of thought and action prescribed have been tested by the author in his own case, and in the case of hundreds of others during 12 years of practice, with continuous and unfailing success. I can say of the science of being well that it works, and that whatever its laws are compiled with, it can no more fail to work than the science of geometry can fail to work. If the tissues of your body have not been so destroyed that continued life is impossible, you can get well. And if you will think and act in a certain way, you will get well. If the reader wishes to fully understand the monistic theory of the cosmos, he is recommended to read Hegel and Emerson, to read also The Eternal News, a pamphlet by J.J. Brown, 300 Cathcart Road, Govan Hill, Glasgow, Scotland. Some enlightenment may also be found in a series of articles by the author, which were published in the Nautilus, Holyoke, Massachusetts, during the year 1909, under the title, What is Truth? Those who wish more detailed information as to the performance of the voluntary functions, eating, drinking, breathing, and sleeping, may read New Science of Living and Healing, Letters to a Woman's Husband, and The Constructive Use of Foods, booklets by W. D. Wattles, which may be obtained from the publishers of this book. I would also recommend the writings of Horace Fletcher and of Edward Hooker Dewey. Read all these, if you like, as a sort of buttress to your faith. But let me warn you against making the mistake of studying many conflicting theories and practicing, at the same time, parts of several different systems. For if you get well, it must be by giving your whole mind to the right way of thinking and living. Remember that the science of being well claims to be a complete and sufficient guide in every particular. Concentrate upon the way of thinking and acting it prescribes, and follow it in every detail, and you will get well, or if you are already well, you will remain so. Trusting that you will go on until the priceless blessing of perfect health is yours, I remain, very truly yours, Wallace D. Wattles. Chapter 1. The principle of health. In the personal application of the science of being well, as in that of the science of getting rich, certain fundamental truths must be known in the beginning and accepted without question. Some of these truths we state here. The perfectly natural performance of function constitutes health, and the perfectly natural performance of function results from the natural action of the principle of life. There is a principle of life in the universe. It is the one living substance from which all things are made. This living substance permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. It is in and through all things, like a very refined, indiffusible ether. All life comes from it. Its life is all the life there is. Man is a form of this living substance and has within him a principle of health. The word principle is used as meaning source. The principle of health in man, when in full constructive activity, causes all the voluntary functions of his life to be perfectly performed. It is the principle of health in man which really works all healing, no matter what system or remedy is employed. And this principle of health is brought into constructive activity by thinking in a certain way. I proceed now to prove this last statement. We all know that cures are wrought by all the different and often opposite methods employed in the various branches of the healing art. The allopath who gives a strong dose of a counterpoison cures his patient, and the homeopath who gives a diminutive dose of the poison most similar to that of the disease also cures it. If allopathy ever cured any given disease, it is certain that homeopathy never cured that disease, and if homeopathy ever cured an ailment, allopathy could not possibly cure that ailment. The two systems are radically opposite in theory and practice, and yet both cure most diseases. And even the remedies used by physicians in any one school are not the same. Go with a case of indigestion to half a dozen doctors and compare their prescriptions. It is more than likely that none of the ingredients of any one of them will be in the others. Must we not conclude that their patients are healed by a principle of health within themselves, and not by something in the varying remedies? Not only this, but we find the same ailments cured by the osteopath with manipulations of the spine, by the faith healer with prayer, by the food scientist with bills of fare, by the Christian scientist with a formulated creed statement, by the mental scientist with affirmation, and by the hygienist with differing plans of living. What conclusion can we come to in the face of all these facts but that there is a principle of health which is the same in all people and which really accomplishes all the cures, and that there is something in all the systems which under favorable conditions arouses the principle of health to action? That is, medicines, manipulations, prayers, bills of fare, affirmations, and hygienic practices cure whenever they cause the principle of health to become active, and fail whenever they do not cause it to become active. Does not all this indicate that the results depend upon the way the patient thinks about the remedy, rather than upon the ingredients in the prescription? There is an old story which furnishes so good an illustration on this point that I will give it here. It is said that in the Middle Ages, the bones of a saint, kept in one of the monasteries, were working miracles of healing. On certain days, a great crowd of the afflicted gathered to touch the relics, and all who did so were healed. On the eve of one of those occasions, some sacrilegious rascal gained access to the case in which the wonder-working relics were kept, and stole the bones. And in the morning, with the usual crowd of sufferers waiting at the gates, the fathers found themselves shorn of the source of the miracle-working power. They resolved to keep the matter quiet, hoping that by doing so they might find the thief and recover their treasures. And hastening to the cellar of the convent, they dug up the bones of a murderer who had been buried there many years before. These they placed in the case, intending to make some plausible excuse for the failure of the saint to perform his usual miracles on that day, and then they let in the waiting assemblage of the sick and infirm. To the intense astonishment of those in the secret, the bones of the malefactor proved as efficacious as those of the saint, and the healing went on as before. One of the fathers is said to have left a history of the occurrence, in which he confessed that, in his judgment, the healing power had been in the people themselves all the time, and never in the bones at all. Whether the story is true or not, the conclusion applies to all the cures wrought by all the systems. The power that heals is in the patient himself, and whether it shall become active or not does not depend upon the physical or mental means used, but upon the way the patient thinks about these means. There is a universal principle of life, as Jesus taught, a great spiritual healing power, and there is a principle of health in man which is related to this healing power. This is dormant or active according to the way a man thinks. He can always quicken it into activity by thinking in a certain way. Your getting well does not depend upon the adoption of some system or the findings of some remedy. People with your identical ailments have been healed by all systems and all remedies. It does not depend upon climate. Some people are well and others are sick in all climates. It does not depend upon avocation, unless in case of those who work under poisonous conditions. People are well in all trades and professions. Your getting well depends upon your beginning to think and act in a certain way. The way a man thinks about things is determined by what he believes about them. His thoughts are determined by his faith, and the results depend upon his making a personal application of his faith. If a man has faith in the efficacy of a medicine, and is able to apply that faith to himself, that medicine will certainly cause him to be cured. But though his faith be great, he will not be cured unless he applies it to himself. Many sick people have faith for others, but none for themselves. So, if he has faith in a system of diet, and can personally apply that faith, it will cure him. And if he has faith in prayers and affirmations, and personally applies his faith, prayers and affirmations will cure him. Faith, personally applied, cures, and no matter how great the faith or how persistent the thought, it will not cure without personal application. The science of being well, then, includes the two fields of thought and action. To be well, it is not enough that man should merely think in a certain way. He must apply his thought to himself, and he must express and externalize it in his outward life by acting in the same way that he thinks. Chapter 2. The Foundations of Faith. Before man can think in the certain way which will cause his diseases to be healed, he must believe in certain truths, which are here stated. All things are made from one living substance, which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. While all visible things are made from it, yet this substance, in its first formless condition, is in and through all the visible forms that it has made. Its life is in all, and its intelligence is in all. This substance creates by thought, and its method is by taking the form of that which it thinks about. The thought of a form held by this substance causes it to assume that form. Thought of a motion causes it to institute that motion. Forms are created by this substance in moving itself into certain attitudes or positions. When original substance wishes to create a given form, it thinks of the motions which will produce that form. When it wishes to create a world, it thinks of the motions, perhaps extending through ages, which will result in its coming into the attitude and form of the world, and these motions are made. When it wishes to create an oak tree, it thinks of the sequences of movement, perhaps extending through ages, which will result in the form of an oak tree, and these motions are made. The particular sequences of motion by which differing forms should be produced were established in the beginning. They are changeless. Certain motions instituted in the formless substance will forever produce certain forms. Man's body is formed from the original substance and is the result of certain motions which first existed as thoughts of original substance. The motions which produce, renew, and repair the body of man are called functions, and these functions are of two classes: voluntary and involuntary. The involuntary functions are under the control of the principle of health in man and are performed in a perfectly healthy manner so long as man thinks in a certain way. The voluntary functions of life are eating, drinking, breathing, and sleeping. These, entirely or in part, are under the direction of man's conscious mind, and he can perform them in a perfectly healthy way if he will. If he does not perform them in a healthy way, he cannot long be well. So we see that if man thinks in a certain way and eats, drinks, breathes, and sleeps in a corresponding way, he will be well. The involuntary functions of man's life are under the direct control of the principle of health, and so long as man thinks in a perfectly healthy way, these functions are perfectly performed, for the action of the principle of health is largely directed by man's conscious thought affecting his subconscious mind. Man is a thinking center, capable of originating thought, and as he does not know everything, he makes mistakes and thinks error. Not knowing everything, he believes things to be true which are not true. Man holds in his thought the idea of diseased and abnormal functioning and conditions, and so perverts the action of the principle of health, causing diseased and abnormal functioning and conditions within his own body. In the original substance, there are held only the thoughts of perfect motion, perfect and healthy function, complete life. God never thinks disease or imperfection, but for countless ages men have held thoughts of disease, abnormality, old age, and death, and the perverted functioning resulting from these thoughts has become a part of the inheritance of the race. Our ancestors have, for many generations, held imperfect ideas concerning human form and functioning, and we begin life with racial, subconscious impressions of imperfection and disease. This is not natural or a part of the plan of nature. The purpose of nature can be nothing else than the perfection of life. This we see from the very nature of life itself. It is the nature of life to continually advance toward more perfect living. Advancement is the inevitable result of the very act of living. Increase is always the result of active living. Whatever lives must live more and more. The seed, lying in the granary, has life, but it is not living. Put it into the soil, and it becomes active, and at once begins to gather to itself from the surrounding substance, and to build a plant form. It will so cause increase that a seed head will be produced containing 30, 60, or 100 seeds, each having as much life as the first. Life by living increases. Life cannot live without increasing, and the fundamental impulse of life is to live. It is in response to this fundamental impulse that original substance works and creates. God must live, and he cannot live except as he creates and increases. In multiplying forms, he is moving on to live more. The universe is a great advancing life, and the purpose of nature is the advancement of life toward perfection, toward perfect functioning. The purpose of nature is perfect health. The purpose of nature, so far as man is concerned, is that he should be continuously advancing into more life and progressing toward perfect life, and that he should live the most complete life possible in his present sphere of action. This must be so, because that which lives in man is seeking more life. Give a little child a pencil and paper, and he begins to draw crude figures. That which lives in him is trying to express itself in art. Give him a set of blocks, and he will try to build something. That which lives in him is seeking expression in architecture. Seat him at a piano, and he will try to draw harmony from the keys. That which lives in him is trying to express itself in music. That which lives in man is always seeking to live more. And since man lives most when he is well, the principle of nature in him can seek only health. The natural state of man is a state of perfect health, and everything in him and in nature tends toward health. Sickness can have no place in the thought of original substance, for it is by its own nature continually impelled toward the fullest and most perfect life, therefore toward health. Man, as he exists in the thought of the formless substance, has perfect health. Disease, which is abnormal or perverted function, motion, imperfectly made or made in the direction of imperfect life, has no place in the thought of the thinking stuff. The Supreme Mind never thinks of disease. Disease was not created or ordained by God or sent forth from Him. It is wholly a product of separate consciousness, of the individual thought of man. God, the formless substance, does not see disease, think disease, know disease, or recognize disease. Disease is recognized only by the thought of man. God thinks nothing but health. From all the foregoing, we see that health is a fact or truth in the original substance from which we are all formed, and that disease is imperfect functioning, resulting from the imperfect thoughts of men, past and present. If man's thoughts of himself had always been those of perfect health, man could not possibly now be otherwise than perfectly healthy. Man in perfect health is the thought of original substance, and man in imperfect health is the result of his own failure to think perfect health and to perform the voluntary functions of life in a healthy way. We will here arrange in a syllabus the basic truths of the science of being well. There is a thinking substance from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. It is the life of all. The thought of a form in this substance causes the form. The thought of a motion produces the motion. In relation to man, the thoughts of this substance are always of perfect functioning and perfect health. Man is a thinking center, capable of original thought, and his thought has power over his own functioning. By thinking imperfect thoughts, he has caused imperfect and perverted functioning, and by performing the voluntary functions of life in a perverted manner, he is assisted in causing disease. If man will think only thoughts of perfect health, he can cause within himself the functioning of perfect health. All the power of life will be exerted to assist him. But this healthy functioning will not continue unless man performs the external or voluntary functions of living in a healthy manner. Man's first step must be to learn how to think perfect health, and his second step to learn how to eat, drink, breathe, and sleep in a perfectly healthy way. If man takes these two steps, he will certainly become well and remain so. Chapter 3: Life and its Organisms. The human body is the abiding place of an energy which renews it when worn, which eliminates waste or poisonous matter, and which repairs the body when broken or injured. This energy we call life. Life is not generated or produced within the body. It produces the body. The seed which has been kept in the storehouse for years will grow when planted in the soil. It will produce a plant. But the life in the plant is not generated by its growing. It is the life which makes the plant grow. The performance of function does not cause life. It is life which causes function to be performed. Life is first, function afterward. It is life which distinguishes organic from inorganic matter, but it is not produced after the organization of matter. Life is the principle or force which causes organization. It builds organisms. It is a principle or force inherent in original substance. All life is one. This life principle of the all is the principle of health in man, and becomes constructively active whenever man thinks in a certain way. Whoever therefore thinks in this certain way will surely have perfect health if his external functioning is in conformity with his thought. But the external functioning must conform to the thought. Man cannot hope to be well by thinking health, if he eats, drinks, breathes, and sleeps like a sick man. The universal life principle, then, is the principle of health in man. It is one with original substance. There is one original substance from which all things are made. This substance is alive, and its life is the principle of life, the universe. This substance has created from itself all the forms of organic life by thinking them, or by thinking the motions and functions which produce them. Original substance thinks only health, because it knows all truth. There is no truth which is not known in the Formless, which is all and in all. It not only knows all truth, but it has all power. Its vital power is the source of all the energy there is. A conscious life which knows all truth and which has all power cannot go wrong or perform function imperfectly, knowing all it knows too much to go wrong, and so the Formless cannot be diseased or think disease. Man is a form of this original substance and has a separate consciousness of his own, but his consciousness is limited and therefore imperfect. By reason of his limited knowledge, man can and does think wrongly, and so he causes perverted and imperfect functioning in his own body. Man has not known too much to go wrong. The diseased or imperfect functioning may not instantly result from an imperfect thought, but it is bound to come if the thought becomes habitual. Any thought continuously held by man tends to the establishment of the corresponding condition in his body. Also, man has failed to learn how to perform the voluntary functions of his life in a healthy way. He does not know when, what, and how to eat. He knows little about breathing and less about sleep. He does all these things in a wrong way and under wrong condition, and this because he has neglected to follow the only sure guide to the knowledge of life. He has tried to live by logic rather than by instinct. He has made living a matter of art and not of nature, and he has gone wrong. His only remedy is to begin to go right, and this he can surely do. It is the work of this book to teach the whole truth, so that the man who reads it shall know too much to go wrong. The thoughts of disease produce the forms of disease. Man must learn to think health and being original substance, which takes the form of its thoughts. He will become the form of health and manifest perfect health in all his functioning. The people who were healed by touching the bones of the saint were really healed by thinking in a certain way, and not by any power emanating from the relics. There is no healing power in the bones of dead men, whether they be those of saint or sinner. The people who were healed by the doses of either the allopath or the homeopath were also really healed by thinking in a certain way. There is no drug which has within itself the power to heal disease. The people who have been healed by prayers and affirmations were also healed by thinking in a certain way. There is no curative power in strings of words. All the sick who have been healed by whatsoever system have thought in a certain way, and a little examination will show us what this way is. The two essentials of the way are faith and a personal application of the faith. The people who touched the saints' bones had faith, and so great was their faith that in the instant they touched the relics, they severed all mental relations with disease and mentally unified themselves with health. This change of mind was accompanied by an intense devotional feeling which penetrated to the deepest recesses of their souls, and so aroused the principle of health to powerful action. By faith they claimed that they were healed or appropriated health to themselves, and in full faith they ceased to think of themselves in connection with disease and thought of themselves only in connection with health. These are the two essentials to thinking in the certain way which will make you well. First, claim or appropriate health by faith, and second, sever all mental relations with disease and enter into mental relations with health. That which we make ourselves mentally, we become physically, and that with which we unite ourselves mentally, we become unified with physically. If your thought always relates you to disease, then your thought becomes a fixed power to cause disease within you. And if your thought always relates you to health, then your thought becomes a fixed power exerted to keep you well. In the case of the people who are healed by medicines, the result is obtained in the same way. They have, consciously or unconsciously, sufficient faith in the means used to cause them to sever mental relations with disease and enter into mental relations with health. Faith may be unconscious. It is possible for us to have a subconscious or inbred faith in things like medicine, in which we do not believe to any extent objectively, and this subconscious faith may be quite sufficient to quicken the principle of health into constructive activity. Many who have little conscious faith are healed in this way, while many others who have great faith in the means are not healed, because they do not make the personal application to themselves. Their faith is general, but not specific for their own cases. In the science of being well, we have two main points to consider. First, how to think with faith, and second, how to so apply the thought to ourselves as to quicken the principle of health into constructive activity. We begin by learning what to think. Chapter 4. What to Think. In order to sever all mental relations with disease, you must enter into mental relations with health, making the process positive, not negative, one of assumption, not of rejection. You are to receive or appropriate health rather than to reject and deny disease. Denying disease accomplishes next to nothing. It does little good to cast out the devil and leave the house vacant, for he will presently return with others worse than himself. When you enter into full and constant mental relations with health, you must of necessity cease all relationship with disease. The first step in the science of being well is, then, to enter into complete thought connection with health. The best way to do this is to form a mental image or picture of yourself as being well, imagining a perfectly strong and healthy body, and to spend sufficient time in contemplating this image to make it your habitual thought of yourself. This is not so easy as it sounds. It necessitates the taking of considerable time for meditation, and not all persons have the imaging faculty well enough developed to form a distinct mental picture of themselves in a perfect or idealized body. It is much easier, as in the science of getting rich, to form a mental image of the things one wants to have, for we have seen these things, or their counterparts, and know how they look. We can picture them very easily from memory. But we have never seen ourselves in a perfect body, and a clear mental image is hard to form. It is not necessary or essential, however, to have a clear mental image of yourself as you wish to be. It is only essential to form a conception of perfect health and to relate yourself to it. This conception of health is not a mental picture of a particular thing. It is an understanding of health, and carries with it the idea of perfect functioning in every part and organ. You may try to picture yourself as perfect in physique. That helps, and you must think of yourself as doing everything in the manner of a perfectly strong and healthy person. You can picture yourself as walking down the street with an erect body and a vigorous stride. You can picture yourself as doing your day's work easily and with surplus vigor, never tired or weak. You can picture in your mind how all things would be done by a person full of health and power, and you can make yourself the central figure in the picture, doing things in just that way. Never think of the ways in which weak or sickly people do things. Always think of the way strong people do things. Spend your leisure time in thinking about the strong way until you have a good conception of it, and always think of yourself in connection with the strong way of doing things. This is what I mean by having a conception of health. In order to establish perfect functioning in every part, man does not have to study anatomy or physiology so that he can form a mental image of each separate organ and address himself to it. He does not have to treat his liver, his kidneys, his stomach, or his heart. There is one principle of health in man which has control over all the involuntary functions of his life, and the thought of perfect health impressed upon this principle will reach each part and organ. Man's liver is not controlled by a liver principle, his stomach by a digestive principle, and so on. The principle of health is one. The less you go into the detailed study of physiology, the better for you. Our knowledge of this science is very imperfect and leads to imperfect thought. Imperfect thought causes imperfect functioning, which is disease. Let me illustrate. Until quite recently, physiology fixed 10 days as the extreme limit of man's endurance without food. It was considered that only in exceptional cases could he survive a longer fast. So the impression became universally disseminated that one who was deprived of food must die in from 5 to 10 days, and numbers of people, when cut off from food by shipwreck, accident, or famine, did die within this period. But the performances of Dr. Tanner, the 40-day faster, and the writings of Dr. Dewey and others on the fasting cure, together with the experiments of numberless people who have fasted from 40 to 60 days, have shown that man's ability to live without food is vastly greater than had been supposed. Any person, properly educated, can fast from 20 to 40 days with little loss in weight, and often with no apparent loss of strength at all. The people who starved to death in 10 days or less did so because they believed that death was inevitable. An erroneous physiology had given them a wrong thought about themselves. When a man is deprived of food, he will die in from 10 to 50 days, according to the way he has been taught, or, in other words, according to the way he thinks about it. So you see that an erroneous physiology can work very mischievous results. No science of being well can be founded on current physiology. It is not sufficiently exact in its knowledge. With all its pretensions, comparatively little is really known as to the interior workings and processes of the body. It is not known just how food is digested. It is not known just what part food plays, if any, in the generation of force. It is not known exactly what the liver, spleen, and pancreas are for, or what part their secretions play in the chemistry of assimilation. On all these and most other points we theorize, but we do not really know. When man begins to study physiology, he enters the domain of theory and disputation. He comes among conflicting opinions, and he is bound to form mistaken ideas concerning himself. These mistaken ideas lead to the thinking of wrong thoughts, and this leads to perverted functioning and disease. All that the most perfect knowledge of physiology could do for man would be to enable him to think only thoughts of perfect health, and to eat, drink, breathe, and sleep in a perfectly healthy way, and this, as we shall show, he can do without studying physiology at all. This, for the most part, is true of all hygiene. There are certain fundamental propositions which we should know, and these will be explained in later chapters. But aside from these propositions, ignore physiology and hygiene. They tend to fill your mind with thoughts of imperfect conditions, and these thoughts will produce the imperfect conditions in your own body. You cannot study any science which recognizes disease if you are to think nothing but health. Drop all investigation as to your present condition, its causes, or possible results, and set yourself to the work of forming a conception of health. Think about health and the possibilities of health, of the work that may be done, and the pleasures that may be enjoyed in a condition of perfect health. Then make this conception your guide in thinking of yourself. Refuse to entertain for an instant any thought of yourself which is not in harmony with it. When any idea of disease or imperfect functioning enters your mind, cast it out instantly by calling upon a thought which is in harmony with the conception of health. Think of yourself at all times as realizing conception, as being a strong and perfectly healthy personage, and do not harbor a contrary thought. Know that as you think of yourself in unity with this conception, the original substance which permeates and fills the tissues of your body is taking form according to the thought, and know that this intelligent substance or mind stuff will cause function to be performed in such a way that your body will be rebuilt with perfectly healthy cells. The intelligent substance from which all things are made permeates and penetrates all things, and so it is in and through your body. It moves according to its thoughts, and so if you hold only the thoughts of perfectly healthy function, it will cause the movements of perfectly healthy function within you. Hold with persistence to the thought of perfect health in relation to yourself. Do not permit yourself to think in any other way. Hold this thought with perfect faith that it is the fact, the truth. It is the truth so far as your mental body is concerned. You have a mind body and a physical body. The mind body takes form just as you think of yourself, and any thought which you hold continuously is made visible by the transformation of the physical body into its image. Implanting the thought of perfect functioning in the mind body will, in due time, cause perfect functioning in the physical body. The transformation of the physical body into the image of the ideal held by the mind body is not accomplished instantaneously. We cannot transfigure our physical bodies as well as Jesus did. In the creation and recreation of forms, substance moves along the fixed lines of growth it has established, and the impression upon it of the health thought causes the healthy body to be built cell by cell. Holding only thoughts of perfect health will ultimately cause perfect functioning, and perfect functioning will in due time produce a perfectly healthy body. It may be as well to condense this chapter into a syllabus. Your physical body is permeated and fitted with an intelligent substance, which forms a body of mind stuff. This mind stuff controls the functioning of your physical body. A thought of disease or of imperfect function impressed upon the mind stuff causes disease or imperfect functioning in the physical body. If you are diseased, it is because wrong thoughts have made impressions on this mind stuff. These may have been either your own thoughts or those of your parents. We begin life with many subconscious impressions, both right and wrong. But the natural tendency of all mind is toward health. And if no thoughts are held in the conscious mind save those of health, all internal functioning will come to be performed in a perfectly healthy manner. The power of nature within you is sufficient to overcome all hereditary impressions, and if you will learn to control your thoughts so that you shall think only those of health, and if you will perform the voluntary functions of life in a perfectly healthy way, you can certainly be well. Chapter 5. Faith. The principle of health is moved by faith. Nothing else can call it into action, and only faith can enable you to relate yourself to health and sever your relation with disease in your thoughts. You will continue to think of disease unless you have faith in health. If you do not have faith, you will doubt. If you doubt, you will fear. And if you fear, you will relate yourself in mind to that which you fear. If you fear disease, you will think of yourself in connection with disease, and that will produce within yourself the form and motions of disease. Just as original substance creates from itself the forms of its thoughts, so your mind-body, which is original substance, takes the form and motion of whatever you think about. If you fear disease, dread disease, have doubts about your safety from disease, or if you even contemplate disease, you will connect yourself with it and create its forms and motions within you. Let me enlarge somewhat upon this point. The potency or creative power of a thought is given to it by the faith that is in it. Thoughts which contain no faith create no forms. The formless substance, which knows all truth, and therefore thinks only truth, has perfect faith in every thought, because it thinks only truth, and so all its thoughts create. But if you will imagine a thought in formless substance in which there was no faith, you will see that such a thought could not cause the substance to move or take form. Keep in mind the fact that only those thoughts which are conceived in faith have creative energy. Only those thoughts which have faith with them are able to change function or to quicken the principle of health into activity. If you do not have faith in health, you will certainly have faith in disease. If you do not have faith in health, it will do you no good to think about health, for your thoughts will have no potency and will cause no change for the better in your conditions. If you do not have faith in health, I repeat, you will have faith in disease. And if, under such conditions, you think about health for 10 hours a day and think about disease for only a few minutes, the disease thought will control your condition because it will have the potency of faith, while the health thought will not. Your mind-body will take on the form and motions of disease and retain them, because your health thought will not have sufficient dynamic force to change form or motion. In order to practice the science of being well, you must have complete faith in health. Faith begins in belief, and we now come to the question, what must you believe in order to have faith in health? You must believe that there is more health power than disease power in both yourself and your environment, and you cannot help believing this if you consider the facts. These are the facts. There is a thinking substance from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. The thought of a form in this substance produces the form. The thought of a motion institutes the motion. In relation to man, the thoughts of original substance are always of perfect health and perfect functioning. This substance, within and without man, always exerts its power toward health. Man is a thinking center, capable of original thought. He has a mind-body of original substance permeating a physical body, and the functioning of his physical body is determined by the faith of his mind-body. If man thinks with faith of the functioning of health, he will cause his internal functions to be performed in a healthy manner, provided that he performs the external functions in a corresponding manner. But if man thinks with faith of disease or of the power of disease, he will cause his internal functioning to be the functioning of disease. The original intelligent substance is in man, moving towards health, and it is pressing upon him from every side. Man lives, moves, and has his being in a limitless ocean of health power, and he uses this power according to his faith. If he appropriates it and applies it to himself, it is all his, and if he unifies himself with it by unquestioning faith, he cannot fail to attain health, for the power of this substance is all the power there is. A belief in the above statements is a foundation for faith and health. If you believe them, you believe that health, the natural state of man, and that man lives in the midst of universal health, that all the power of nature makes for health, and that health is possible to all and can surely be attained by all. You will believe that the power of health in the universe is 10,000 times greater than that of disease. In fact, that disease has no power whatever, being only the result of perverted thought and faith. And if you believe that health is possible to you, and that it may surely be attained by you, and that you know exactly what to do in order to attain it, you will have faith in health. You will have this faith and knowledge if you read this book through with care and determine to believe in and practice its teachings. It is not merely the possession of faith, but the personal application of faith, which works healing. You must claim health in the beginning and form a conception of health, and as far as may be of yourself as a perfectly healthy person, and then, by faith, you must claim that you are realizing this conception. Do not assert with faith that you are going to get well. Assert with faith that you are well. Having faith in health and applying it to yourself means having faith that you are healthy, and the first step in this is to claim that it is the truth. Mentally take the attitude of being well. Do not say anything or do anything which contradicts this attitude. Never speak a word or assume a physical attitude which does not harmonize with this claim. I am perfectly well. When you walk, go with a brisk step and with your chest thrown out and your head held up. Watch that at all times your physical actions and attitudes are those of a healthy person. When you find that you have relapsed into the attitude of weakness or disease, change instantly. Straighten up. Think of health and power. Refuse to consider yourself as others than a perfectly healthy person. One greatest aid, perhaps the greatest aid, in applying your faith you will find in the exercise of gratitude. Whenever you think of yourself or of your advancing condition, give thanks to the great intelligent substance for the perfect health you are enjoying. Remember that, as Swedenborg taught, there is a continual inflow of life from the Supreme, which is received by all created things according to their forms, and by man according to his faith. Health from God is continually being urged upon you, and when you think of this, lift up your mind reverently to Him, and give thanks that you have been led to the truth and into perfect health of mind and body. Be all the time in a grateful frame of mind, and let gratitude be evident in your speech. Gratitude will help you to own and control your own field of thought. Whenever the thought of disease is presented to you, instantly claim health and thank God for the perfect health you have. Do this so that there shall be no room in your mind for a thought of ill. Every thought connected in any way with ill health is unwelcome, and you can close the door of your mind in its face by asserting that you are well, and by reverently thanking God that it is so. Soon the old thoughts will return no more. Gratitude has a twofold effect. It strengthens your own faith, and it brings you into close and harmonious relations with the Supreme. You believe that there is one intelligent substance from which all life and all power come. You believe that you receive your own life from this substance, and you relate yourself closely to it by feeling continuous gratitude. It is easy to see that the more closely you relate yourself to the source of life, the more readily you may receive life from it, and it is easy also to see that your relation to it is a matter of mental attitude. We cannot come into physical relationship with God, for God is mind stuff, and we also are mind stuff. Our relation with Him must therefore be a mind relation. It is plain, then, that the man who feels deep and heartily gratitude will live in closer touch with God than the man who never looks up to Him in thankfulness. The ungrateful or unthankful mind really denies that it receives at all, and so cuts its connection with the Supreme. The grateful mind is always looking toward the Supreme, and is always open to receive from it, and it will receive continually. The principle of health in man receives its vital power from the principle of life in the universe, and man relates himself to the principle of life by faith in health, and by gratitude for the health he receives. Man may cultivate both faith and gratitude by the proper use of his will. Chapter 6. Use of the Will. In the practice of the science of being well, the will is not used to compel yourself to go when you are not really able to go, or to do things when you are not physically strong enough to do them. You do not direct your will upon your physical body, or try to compel the proper performance of internal function by willpower. You direct the will upon the mind, and use it in determining what you shall believe, what you shall think, and to what you shall give your attention. The will should never be used upon any person or thing external to you, and it should never be used upon your own body. The sole legitimate use of the will is in determining to what you shall give your attention and what you shall think about the things to which your attention is given. All belief begins in the will to believe. You cannot always and instantly believe what you will to believe, but you can always will to believe what you want to believe. You want to believe truth about health, and you can will to do so. The statements you have been reading in this book are the truth about health, and you can will to believe them. This must be your first step toward getting well. These are the statements you must will to believe: that there is a thinking substance from which all things are made, and that man receives the principle of health, which is his life, from this substance. That man himself is thinking substance, a mind-body permeating a physical body, and that as man's thoughts are, so will the functioning of his physical body be. That if man will think only thoughts of perfect health, he must and will cause the internal and involuntary functioning of his body to be the functioning of health, provided that his external and voluntary functioning and attitude are in accordance with his thoughts. When you will to believe these statements, you must also begin to act upon them. You cannot long retain a belief unless you act upon it. You cannot increase a belief until it becomes faith unless you act upon it, and you certainly cannot expect to reap benefits in any way from a belief so long as you act as if the opposite were true. You cannot long have faith in health if you continue to act like a sick person. If you continue to act like a sick person, you cannot help continuing to think of yourself as a sick person. And if you continue to think of yourself as a sick person, you will continue to be a sick person. The first step toward acting externally like a well person is to begin to act internally like a well person. Form your conception of perfect health, and get into the way of thinking about perfect health until it begins to have a definitive meaning to you. Picture yourself as doing things a strong and healthy person would do, and have faith that you can and will do those things in that way. Continue this until you have a vivid conception of health and what it means to you. When I speak in this book of a conception of health, I mean a conception that carries with it the idea of the way a healthy person looks and does things. Think of yourself in connection with health until you form a conception of how you would live, appear, act, and do things as a perfectly healthy person. Think about yourself in connection with health until you conceive of yourself in imagination as always doing everything in the manner of a well person, until the thought of health conveys the idea of what health means to you. As I have said in a former chapter, you may not be able to form a clear mental image of yourself in perfect health, but you can form a conception of yourself as acting like a healthy person. Form this conception and then think only thoughts of perfect health in relation to yourself and, so far as may be possible, in relation to others. When a thought of sickness or disease is presented to you, reject it. Do not let it get into your mind. Do not entertain or consider it at all. Meet it by thinking health, by thinking that you are well, and by being sincerely grateful for the health you are receiving. Whenever suggestions of disease are coming thick and fast upon, and you are in a tight place, fall back upon the exercise of gratitude. Connect yourself with the Supreme. Give thanks to God for the perfect health He gives you, and you will soon find yourself able to control your thoughts and to think what you want to think. In times of doubt, trial, and temptation, the exercise of gratitude is always a sheet anchor which will prevent you from being swept away. Remember that the great essential thing is to sever all mental relations with disease and to enter into full mental relationship with health. This is the key to all mental healing. It is the whole thing. Here we see the secret of the great success of Christian Science, more than any other formulated system of practice. It insists that its converts shall sever relations with disease and relate themselves fully with health. The healing power of Christian Science is not in its theological formula, nor in its denial of matter, but in the fact that it induces the sick to ignore disease as an unreal thing and accept health by faith as a reality. Its failures are made because its practitioners, while thinking in a certain way, do not eat, drink, breathe, and sleep in the same way. While there is no healing power in the repetition of strings of words, yet it is a very convenient thing to have the central thoughts so formulated that you can repeat them readily, so that you can use them as affirmations whenever you are surrounded by an environment which gives you adverse suggestions. When those around you begin to talk of sickness and death, close your ears and mentally assert something like the following: There is one substance, and I am that substance. That substance is eternal, and it is life. I am that substance, and I am eternal life. That substance knows no disease. I am that substance, and I am health. Exercise your willpower in choosing only those thoughts which are thoughts of health, and arrange your environment so that it shall suggest thoughts of health. Do not have about you books, pictures, or other things which suggest death, disease, deformity, weakness, or age. Have only those which convey the ideas of health, power, joy, vitality, and youth. When you are confronted with a book or anything else which suggests disease, do not give it your attention. Think of your conception of health and your gratitude, and affirm as above. Use your willpower to fix your attention upon thoughts of health. In a future chapter I shall touch upon this point again. What I wish to make plain here is that you must think only health, recognize only health, and give your attention only to health, and that you must control thought, recognition, and attention by the use of your will. Do not try to use your will to compel the healthy performance of function within you. The principle of health will attend to that. If you give your attention only to thoughts of health, do not try to exert your will upon the formless to compel it to give you more vitality or power. It is already placing all the power there is at your service. You do not have to use your will to conquer adverse conditions or to subdue unfriendly forces. There are no unfriendly forces. There is only one force, and that force is friendly to you. It is a force which makes for health. Everything in the universe wants you to be well. You have absolutely nothing to overcome but your own habit of thinking in a certain way about disease, and you can do this only by forming a habit of thinking in another certain way about health. Man can cause all the internal functions of his body to be performed in a perfectly healthy manner by continuously thinking in a certain way and by performing the external functions in a certain way. He can think in this certain way by controlling his attention, and he can control his attention by the use of his will. He can decide what things he will think about. Chapter 7. Health from God. I will give a chapter here to explaining how man may receive health from the Supreme. By the Supreme I mean the thinking substance from which all things are made, and which is in all and through all, seeking more complete expression and fuller life. This intelligent substance, in a perfectly fluid state, permeates and penetrates all things, and is in touch with all minds. It is the source of all energy and power, and constitutes the inflow of life, which Swedenborg saw vitalizing all things. It is working to one definitive end and for the fulfillment of one purpose, and that purpose is the advancement of life toward the complete expression of mind. When man harmonizes himself with this intelligence, it can and will give him health and wisdom. When man holds steadily to the purpose to live more abundantly, he comes into harmony with this supreme intelligence. The purpose of the Supreme Intelligence is the most abundant life for all. The purpose of this Supreme Intelligence for you is that you should live more abundantly. If, then, your own purpose is to live more abundantly, you are unified with the Supreme. You are working with it, and it must work with you. But as the Supreme Intelligence is in all, if you harmonize with it, you must harmonize with all, and you must desire more abundant life for all as well as for yourself. Two great benefits come to you from being in harmony with the Supreme Intelligence. First, you will receive wisdom. By wisdom, I do not mean knowledge of facts so much as ability to perceive and understand facts, and to judge soundly and act rightly in all matters relating to life. Wisdom is the power to perceive truth and the ability to make the best use of the knowledge of truth. It is the power to perceive at once the best end to aim at and the means best adapted to attain that end. With wisdom comes poise and the power to think rightly, to control and guide your thoughts, and to avoid the difficulties which come from wrong thinking. With wisdom, you will be able to select the right courses for your particular needs, and to so govern yourself in all ways as to secure the best results. You will know how to do what you want to do. You can readily see that wisdom must be an essential attribute of the Supreme Intelligence, since that which you knows all truth must be wise. And you can also see that just in proportion as you harmonize and unify your mind with that intelligence, you will have wisdom. But I repeat that since this intelligence is all and in all, you can enter into its wisdom only by harmonizing with all. If there is anything in your desires or your purpose which will bring oppression to any, or work injustice to, or cause lack of life for any, you cannot receive wisdom from the Supreme. Furthermore, your purpose for your own self must be the best. Man can live in three general ways: for the gratification of his body, for that of his intellect, or for that of his soul. The first is accomplished by satisfying the desires for food, drink, and those other things which give enjoyable physical sensations. The second is accomplished by doing those things which cause pleasant mental sensations, such as gratifying the desire for knowledge, or those for fine clothing, fame, power, and so on. The third is accomplished by giving way to the instincts of unselfish love and altruism. Man lives most wisely and completely when he functions most perfectly along all of those lines, without excess in any of them. The man who lives swinishly for the body alone is unwise and out of harmony with God. That man who lives solely for the cold enjoyments of the intellect, though he be absolutely moral, is unwise and out of harmony with God. And the man who lives wholly for the practice of altruism, and who throws himself away for others, is as unwise and as far from harmony with God as those who go to excess in other ways. To come into full harmony with the Supreme, you must purpose to live to the utmost of your capabilities in body, mind, and soul. This must mean the full exercise of function in all the different ways, but without excess, for excess in one causes deficiency in the others. Behind your desire for health is your own desire for more abundant life, and behind that is the desire of the formless intelligence to live more fully in you. So, as you advance toward perfect health, hold steadily to the purpose to attain complete life, physical, mental, and spiritual, to advance in all ways, and in every way to live more. If you hold this purpose, you will be given wisdom. He that willeth to do the will of the Father shall know, said Jesus. Wisdom is the most desirable gift that can come to man, for it makes him rightly self-governing. But wisdom is not all you may receive from the Supreme Intelligence. You may receive physical energy, vitality, life force. The energy of the formless substance is unlimited and permeates everything. You are already receiving or appropriating to yourself this energy in an automatic and instinctive way, but you can do so to a far greater degree if you set about it intelligently. The measure of a man's strength is not what God is willing to give him, but what he himself has the will and the intelligence to appropriate to himself. God gives you all there is. Your only question is how much to take of the unlimited supply. Professor James has pointed out that there is apparently no limit to the powers of men, and this is simply because man's power comes from the inexhaustible reservoir of the Supreme. The runner who has reached the stage of exhaustion, when his physical power seems entirely gone, by running on in a certain way, may receive his second wind. His strength is renewed in a seemingly miraculous fashion, and he can go on indefinitely. And by continuing in the certain way, he may receive a third, fourth, and fifth wind. We do not know where the limit is, or how far it may be possible to extend it. The conditions are that the runner must have absolute faith that the strength will come, that he must think steadily of strength and have perfect confidence that he has it, and that he must continue to run on. If he admits a doubt into his mind, he falls exhausted, and if he stops running to wait for the accession of strength, it will never come. His faith in strength, his faith that he can keep on running, his unwavering purpose to keep on running, and his action in keeping on seem to connect him to the source of energy in such a way as to bring him a new supply. In a very similar manner, the sick person who has unquestioning faith in health, whose purpose brings him into harmony with the source, and who performs the voluntary functions of life in a certain way, will receive vital energy sufficient for all his needs and for the healing of all his diseases. God, who seeks to live and express himself fully in man, delights to give man all that is needed for the most abundant life. Action and reaction are equal, and when you desire to live more, if you are in mental harmony with the Supreme, the forces which make for life begin to concentrate about you and upon you. The one life begins to move towards you, and your environment becomes surcharged with it. Then, if you appropriate it by faith, it is yours. Ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Your Father giveth not his Spirit by measure. He delights to give good gifts to you. Chapter 8. Summary of the Mental Actions. Let me now summarize the mental actions and attitudes necessary to the practice of the science of being well. First, you believe that there is a thinking substance from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. This substance is the life of all, and is seeking to express more life in all. It is the principle of life of the universe, and the principle of health in man. Man is a form of this substance, and draws his vitality from it. He is a mind-body of original substance, permeating a physical body, and the thoughts of his mind-body control the functioning of his physical body. If man thinks no thoughts save those of perfect health, the functions of his physical body will be performed in a manner of perfect health. If you would consciously relate yourself to the all health, your purpose must be to live fully on every plane of your being. You must want all that there is in life for body, mind, and soul, and this will bring you into harmony with all the life there is. The person who is in conscious and intelligent harmony with all will receive a continuous inflow of vital power from the Supreme Life, and this inflow is prevented by angry, selfish, or antagonistic mental attitudes. If you are against any part, you have severed relations with all. You will receive life, but only instinctively and automatically, not intelligently and purposefully. You can see that if you are mentally antagonistic to any part, you cannot be in complete harmony with the whole. Therefore, as Jesus directed, be reconciled to everybody and everything before you offer worship. Want for everybody all that you want for yourself. The reader is recommended to read what we have said in a former work concerning the competitive mind and the creative mind. It is very doubtful whether one who has lost health can completely regain it so long as he remains in the competitive mind. Being on the creative or goodwill plane in mind, the next step is to form a conception of yourself as in perfect health, and to hold no thoughts which are not in full harmony with this conception. Have faith that if you think only thoughts of health, you will establish in your physical body the functioning of health, and use your will to determine that you will think only thoughts of health. Never think of yourself as sick or as likely to be sick. Never think of sickness in connection with yourself at all. And, as far as may be, shut out of your mind all thoughts of sickness in connection with others. Surround yourself as much as possible with the things which suggest the ideas of strength and health. Have faith in health and accept health as an actual present fact in your life. Claim health as a blessing bestowed upon you by the Supreme Life, and be deeply grateful at all times. Claim the blessing by faith. Know that it is yours, and never admit a contrary thought to your mind. Use your willpower to withhold your attention from every appearance of disease in yourself and others. Do not study disease, think about it, nor speak of it. At all times, when the thought of disease is thrust upon you, move forward into the mental position of prayerful gratitude for your perfect health. The mental actions necessary to being well may now be summed up in a single sentence. Form a conception of yourself in perfect health, and think only those thoughts which are in harmony with that conception. That, with faith and gratitude and the purpose to really live, covers all the requirements. It is not necessary to take mental exercises of any kind, except as described in Chapter 6, or to do wearying stunts in the way of affirmations and so on. It is not necessary to concentrate the mind on the affected parts. It is far better not to think of any part as affected. It is not necessary to treat yourself by autosuggestion or to have others treat you in any way whatever. The power that heals is the principle of health within you, and to call this principle into constructive action, it is only necessary, having harmonized yourself with the All-Mind, to claim by faith the All-Health, and to hold that claim until it is physically manifested in all the functions of your body. In order to hold this mental attitude of faith, gratitude, and health, however, your external acts must be only those of health. You cannot long hold the internal attitude of a well person if you continue to perform the external acts of a sick person. It is essential not only that your every thought should be a thought of health, but that your every act should be an act of health performed in a healthy manner. If you will make every thought a thought of health, and every conscious act an act of health, it must infallibly follow that every internal and unconscious function shall come to be healthy. For all the power of life is being continually exerted toward health. We shall next consider how you make every act an act of health.